Reeve, principal of Vanderveer Elementary School.
And I'm Dr. Tian, superintendent of schools.
We are so excited to welcome everyone to our Vanderveer Evening Learning Academy.
You are all in for weeks and weeks of enjoyment.
You will be learning alongside your very own Vanderveer teachers.
Also, we have teachers and administrators from across the district that will be bringing you fun learning experiences.
You will become scientists, engineers, mathematicians, writers, world explorers, and learn to communicate in different languages as you explore concepts in math, reading, writing, science, social studies, world language, and so many more.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we encourage you to visit often and view other lessons in our learning library as we add to the videos each week. Enjoy!
In Australia, does the water really spin down the drain in the opposite direction? And is it possible to drive from New Jersey to Australia? Did your children ride kangaroos to school when they were there? Those are just 3 of the questions that I receive when people find out that I lived in Australia for 8 years. And yes, the water does spin down the drain in the opposite direction. To find out answers to the other questions and many more, I'm glad you're here to watch this presentation, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Thank you. Good day. That is how we say hello in Australia. Today, we are going on a virtual field trip where you'll see what it's like to go to school there. My name is Madam Taylor, and I am a French teacher at Somerville High School. My family lived in Australia for 8 years. First, we'll have to buckle our seatbelts for a long plane flight. It will take 5 hours to go from New Jersey to California. From Los Angeles to Sydney, it is 15 more hours. Have you ever been on a long plane flight? If so, you might have passed the time by watching a movie. When you fly to Australia, you'll have time to watch 5 movies and still get plenty of sleep. Even though they are far away from each other, the US and Australia have 2 important things in common. By looking at this map, you can see one of them. Both countries have lots of land. They also have the common language of English. However, the Australian accent and expressions can be quite different. Can you name any famous cities around the world? Sydney is the most famous city in Australia. That's where I lived, and that's where my children went to school. A popular time to travel to Australia is December, January, and February. Except you won't need to pack your winter clothing because those are the hottest months in Australia. When it is cold in New Jersey, it is warm in Australia. That is because America is above the equator and Australia is below it. The equator is an imaginary circle that divides the top half of the world with the bottom half. That is why one of the nicknames for Australia is the land down under. Australians also call their country the lucky country. I think you will see why. If you like pizza, pizza is a popular food in Australia too. One of my favorite restaurants was called the Red Centre. The name of this restaurant will help you to remember the geography of Australia or what it is like on the map. The center of Australia is like the center of a pizza. It is red, but there's no tomato sauce. Instead, there is a beautiful red, sandy desert. Seeing the Australian desert for the first time is like seeing snow for the first time. It is magical. Unfortunately, there is not enough water for a lot of people to live in the Australian desert. The edges of Australia are different than the red center. You can think of the edges of Australia as you would the crust of the pizza. It is different. Australia is an island continent surrounded by ocean, and people live in cities along the edges of the country. Do you like fireworks? If you were in Australia on New Year's Eve, you'd probably stay up late and watch these fireworks. These are near the Sydney Opera House. On the left, you'll see a picture of the Opera House at night. On the right is a picture of the Opera House during the day. Which picture do you like best? I like the daytime picture because it shows a beautiful Sydney ferry boat. You can take one to the zoo, to the beach, or even an amusement park. It's also possible to take a Sydney ferry boat to your office in the city. Have you ever been to a live music event? The Opera House is one of the places we go to see concerts in Sydney. 50 years ago, they had a contest to see who could design the best building on Sydney Harbor. People from all over the world entered this contest, and an architect from Europe won. He had to move to Australia with his children while this building was being built. They thought it would take 3 years. It took 14 years instead. People come all over the world to see this building because they think it's one of the great pieces of architecture in the world. This is partly because it looks like a ship on the water, even though it was built on land. Do you like to swim? It is summer weather and summer vacation in January. So you would spend your days at the beach. The beaches in Australia have cool names like Whale Beach, Curl Curl, Narrabeen, and even the most celebrated beaches in Sydney, such as Bondi Beach, rarely get crowded because there are so many great beaches to choose from. In Australia, you and your parents do not have to pay to go to a beach. Beaches are for everybody, and they are always free. Most of the beaches have something called a rock pool. That is a pool like this one, built right next to the ocean, and it has salt water from the ocean. There is no chlorine in it. It is a little safer than swimming in the open ocean, especially on days when the waves are high. Can you repeat these beach names? Coogee, Bondi, Wollongong. A lot of beach names and other place names in Australia have names which were given by its first inhabitants, the Aboriginal people. You know how Native Americans were the first people to inhabit the US? Well, Aboriginal people have been in Australia for 30,000 years. They have a close connection to the land and the many interesting animals of Australia. They are 3% of the population now, and most Aboriginals have their own land and their own culture, which is far away from Sydney. However, Aboriginal people are famous for their paintings, and you can buy a picture or a postcard as a souvenir in Sydney. Can you tell what animals are in this painting? On the left is an emu, which is a giant bird. On the right is a kangaroo. Some people call this X-ray art because it depicts the inside of the animal. These paintings are created on a large canvas. Aboriginal artists paint outdoors with their canvases on the ground, while several painters collaborate on one picture at the same time. If you look closely, you'll see two kinds of paw prints in the picture. Do you see them? Your Australian summer vacation ends in February when it is time to start school. In Australia, all children wear school uniforms, whether you go to public or private school. Each school has its own uniform, and most students are very proud of theirs. Most schools, but not all, are co-ed, so they have a mix of boys and girls. If you look in the corner of this photo, you'll notice that even the school backpacks are identical. What would you do if your backpack looked like that of every other student? Well, in Australian schools, you need everything labeled because everything looks the same. You might think it gets confusing, but things usually work themselves out. Have you ever had a sunburn? Ouch. Well, at Australian schools, students must wear hats when they are outside. There is a saying, no hat, no play. That means that if you lose or forget your hat, you are not allowed to play outside at recess that day because you are not fully protected from the hot Australian sun. From a very early age, every Australian student knows this slogan: slip, slop, slap. Can you say it with me? Slip, slop, slap. Slip on a shirt, slop on sunscreen, slap on a hat. What do you know about kangaroos? Kangaroos are the world's biggest hopping animals. They use their powerful back legs to hop and their tails for balance. If you were in Australia, you might even have a kangaroo in your backpack in the form of a $1 coin. Australia has a relationship with England. So the Queen of England is on one side of this $1 coin. On the other side, this is what you would call, in Australian, a mob of roos. Can you say mob of roos? Australians love kangaroos. They're a little like deer are in our part of the US. By this, I mean that you don't see them in cities, but they're mostly in the woods. Like deer, you often see kangaroos in a group or a mob. Once I saw a large group of kangaroos in a park. I needed to walk through this group of kangaroos to get back to my car. They were staring at me just like they are staring at us right now. At first, I was afraid because some kangaroos are very big and strong. But then I remembered something else that kangaroos have in common with deer. They're actually quite shy about people. I walked up to the group of kangaroos, hoping they would scatter, and they did. They hopped away. The mother kangaroos have pockets to hold their young babies, which are called joeys. The male kangaroos sometimes box each other, but again, they would not hurt a human. What sports do you play during gym? In Australia, children take surf lifesaving as part of gym class because they mostly live near the sea and water safety is very important. You might also notice these bathing caps, which boys, girls, and real older lifeguards are very proud to wear. In Australian surf lifesaving, you learn important things, such as if you are caught in a riptide or a strong current in the ocean, you should not fight it, you should not panic. It will eventually bring you back to where you started if you allow it to carry you back. Are you familiar with Harry Potter? You may know that he's from England, not Australia. And you might also know that he is in the Gryffindor house, I believe. In Australian schools, you will also belong to a house. In Australia, these are called colour houses. And you belong to one where you compete to have the most points by the end of the year. If you had older siblings, you would be put in the same colour house as they are. After all, it's not good to compete too much with your own siblings at the breakfast table in the morning before school. As summer turns to autumn in Australia, which is March, April, and May, students change out parts of their school uniforms. Boys might start wearing long pants instead of shorts like these. And girls may choose to wear pants instead of skirts or dresses. Putting on warmer clothes is called rugging up in Australian English. And they don't use the word sweater in Australia. They call sweaters woolly jumpers. Can you say woolly jumper? Very good. Rabbits are not a native animal in Sydney, but there is a cute Australian animal that is called a bilby. It looks a little like a rabbit, except the females have pouches for their young. Australians of all religions love Easter candy. My children received chocolate bilbies on Easter morning. This is what an Easter bilby looks like. And this picture is a real bilby. Do you see the red sand below its paws? This is because they live mostly in the desert. Do you think it's cute? These moms have pouches too. In winter, which is June, July, and August in Australia, students wear blazers and warm scarves. In Sydney, it's never cold enough to need a real winter coat, and it does not snow. Gym and recess are still mostly outdoors, and students continue to eat lunch outdoors throughout the year. That is, unless they forget their hat. You remember the expression, no hat, no play. Can you say that for me? No hat, no play. Food is sold at a stand in the school called a tuck shop. At the tuck shop, there are foods like sushi, which are popular because Australia is neighbors with Asia. Another popular dish is called a jaffle, which is a little bit like a grilled cheese sandwich. Where do you play at recess if it's raining? It doesn't rain too often in Australia, but children can still play outside at recess thanks to the shade sails. These giant shades on Sydney playgrounds provide protection from the rain. As a bonus, these shades also protect your skin from too much sun and heat on hot days. Most schools do not have gyms or cafeterias because the children play and eat outside. In September and October and November, it is spring in Sydney. Students no longer need their scarves or their blazers to keep warm. At some schools, students go on a school-wide camping trip, which includes at least one night away from home. Australians love the outdoors, and it's important to teach camping skills to students. First graders spend one night away from home with their teachers and their classmates. Second graders spend 2 nights away with their classmates and teachers. By the time students are in high school, they might spend up to a week away, and they get to use the many skills they have learned over the years. Would you like to go on a camping trip with your teachers and your classmates? While students spend time in the Australian countryside, which they call the bush, they might see koala bears. Koala bears eat a lot of leaves from gum trees, and they spend a lot of time sleeping. At Taronga Zoo in Sydney, you can have your picture taken holding a koala. Many Australian animals are marsupials. Can you say marsupial? This means they live in their mother's pouches when they are very young. Which marsupial is your favorite? You might have noticed that Australians are very proud of their animals. You will see pictures of animals on their coins, their artwork, and their chocolates. This caramello koala is another popular chocolate treat that is available only in Australia. You have been a great traveler today. When somebody does a good job in Australia, we say, good on you, which is what I'm going to say to you today. Thank you for taking part in this adventure with me. I hope you have a chance to visit Sydney, Australia, and discover even more reasons why Australians call it the lucky country. Thank you for listening.